With us tonight. I know you have been crisscrossing the state, doing a lot of work, and I've had the joy of speaking with most of you several times, and I appreciate very much tonight that you have come down. Now, one of the things you might recognize is that since there are 7 people, we were thinking about this a lot over the last month or so. If there are 7 people, each one answering for 2 minutes at a time, and I take 1 minute, say, to ask the question, that is a quarter hour per question. And so we are going to try to move rapidly, but I do want to also leave a little time for you to give just some closing remarks at the end. And so we are going to start on my left and go through. I will alternate those questions as we go through and then give everyone the opportunity to speak. So we'll start with personal views on governing. And so we'll start with you, Mr. Christensen. And it's this: the phrase separation of church and state is frequently invoked in debates surrounding public policy. Some choose to ignore the original meaning of the phrase, which was to ensure that there was no established Church of America, and instead imply that people of faith should set aside their moral convictions when governing. If elected, would you govern according to moral convictions informed by your faith, or should those convictions be set aside in public office? And do you believe elected officials bear moral responsibility for the laws they advance, oppose, or permit? Please explain.
The way I look at it is this: my moral code, my faith, and the way I've led in the federal government, both in the military and in the federal government civilian side, it's inseparable. It's part of who I am. It's my character, it's the culture, values, and traditions I learned growing up in Wyoming. And I'm going to share with you a quick example of that. I've shared my faith publicly, and it's guided my decisions. March 20th, 5 a.m., 234 soldiers of my cavalry squadron are 34 minutes from crossing the berm and going into combat as we invaded Iraq. I invited those men and women around me for a moment of prayer. We were 34 minutes away from starting combat. Tanks are going to roll. We bowed our heads. We asked for the presence of the Holy Spirit. I felt it descend upon us, and I knew that we were going to be victorious in our combat as we were going to do the work of the United States of America. Every one of those 234 people had raised their hand and sworn an oath that included, "So help me God." And there we were at that moment. I have professed my faith. It has guided my decisions that I've made both in the military and in the federal government. It is exactly what the moral code is. The laws that we pass, we are accountable for those, and we are accountable before God. God will judge us on how we act, and if we do not uphold His will, then we are not living in accordance to His will.
Thank you very much. Mr. Freeze.
That was fantastic. That was wonderful. I'm moved. I'm sorry. I'm just moved by that. I would have to say that I agree entirely that this is our moral convictions are the center of who we are. I think I really found that when I moved to Wyoming. I was baptized in the Shoshone River and really built a life here. My daughter's with me. This is the land that I care about. This is the place that I live. This is where my faith came to fruition. Everything that I do, I put through that layer of prayer. And it's why I prayed carefully about whether I would pursue this opportunity to serve you all. And I prayed that doors be open if it was meant to be, and doors be closed if it wasn't. And I just kept getting the signal that this was an opportunity that I could use to put my skills to work for the state. Yes, we're completely held accountable for what we believe and how we act that out in our office with this great responsibility.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bala.
Yes, thank you for that opening question, because it's a wonderful way to open this, and also thank you, Wyoming Family Alliance, for hosting this. The short answer is yes and yes. Here's a little more detail. God is my guardian. God is my boss. God is my work partner. God is my judge. God is everything. And if I didn't carry God with me every single day that I work, that I engage with my family, that I engage with friends and that I grow personally, I would be nowhere. So taking God into my job as U.S. Congresswoman is really no question at all. A little bit about my faith. I grew up Baptist and I'm born again Christian. And when, excuse me, when I married a Catholic, I converted to Catholicism. I have a deep respect for all kinds of Christian faith, but also for religious liberty. That is so important when you are working alongside colleagues from literally all over the world who are American citizens, to not only carry your faith, but recognize that people of other faiths are carrying with them their God as their guardian. We should never check our faith at the door. We should always carry it with us. We can do that quietly, peacefully, or we can choose to use more of a voice when we carry God with us. Either is absolutely okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gerald.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Nathan.
Is it
Gerald.
Thanks for helping me.
It works out well.
Yeah.
One way or the other. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you to the Wyoming Family Alliance, and thank you to everyone coming out, spending time in your evening to come listen to all 7 of us. My wife Alex and I are both practicing Catholics. Our faith is deeply important to us. It's not just a campaign plank, but it's how we seek to live our lives, and it's the moral foundation for how we live, but also how I would like to govern, given the opportunity to be the next U.S. representative. One thing that's important to understand about my upbringing, I spent my entire life in service, and as soon as you open a parachute door, it's common to say in the United States Army, there are plenty of atheists, but as soon as that parachute door opens, everyone is a God-fearing person. And that's simply to say, as times get tough, we all look to God. Whatever challenges we face, whatever's up next for the next 250 years, we look to God and our Judeo-Christian foundation. There's a statue of a man sitting in the House chamber, and it's the only statue that looks directly at the Speaker of the House in the dais. It's Moses, the original lawgiver. And our national motto is, "In God we trust." That says it all. For us, God is the foundation of this nation, and it's what will see us through for the next 250 years. So I just wanted to simply close by saying there's a division of church and state, but only insofar as there's no state-mandated religion. We, as a moral country, we need those virtues in order to carry us forward and to ensure that the laws that are governing this country of 340 million, and so that we can sustain that, are informed by our moral and divine Creator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to come today and meet all of you. It's my pleasure. It's my honor. Our moral convictions are not something that we can negotiate. We have to stand pat on our Christianity, and we have to make certain that we can look in the mirror, look at our family, look at our friends. And further, we have to make certain that when there's an issue, and one of you has an issue that affects your religious rights, that we're there to help you. That's our job. So, yes, we have to stand pat to our moral convictions in legislation, but we have to go further. We have to make certain that yours are protected. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, almost called you Bo. Senator Beitman, I know you're president of the Senate. Rather than call you President Beitman through all of this, just to have that sense of equality, I'll just refer to you as Mr. And the same also, Mr. Gray, I know you're Secretary of State, but just to make sure that everyone's called with that same title, I'll call you Mr.
I've always been Chuck. We're fun.
Very good. Thanks, man. I had the joy of serving with you both.
Could you restate the question, because we don't have them up here?
Oh,
And I'd like to answer your question directly instead of go off on a tangent. So.
Certainly, yes. Well, I will rephrase the question. We'll also make sure that you have those pages for you. So if we'll take just about 30 seconds here, we'll make sure that you will have those in front of you.
Thank you.
Do the rest of you have those down here? Very good. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. I apologize for that. And I'll restate the question so that you'll have it straightforward. The phrase separation of church and state is frequently invoked in debates surrounding public policy. Some choose to ignore the original meaning of that phrase, which was to ensure that there was no established Church of America, and instead imply that people of faith should set aside their moral convictions when governing. If elected, would you govern according to moral convictions informed by your faith, or should those convictions be set aside in public office? And do you believe elected officials bear moral responsibility for the laws they advance, oppose, or permit? And please explain.
Great, thank you. And yes, I would absolutely govern according to my faith and my moral convictions. When Thomas Jefferson wrote this letter in 1802 to Danbury Baptist Church, that's what got twisted. And you hear liberals, even Republicans now, try to say that's part of the Constitution. I don't know how many times I've heard that. It's so inaccurate. You're exactly right. It was about prohibiting the state church, which is what Jefferson was referring to in that letter. So in order to have, and I think Madison was quoted as saying, this Constitution is only for a virtuous and religious society. It is wholly inadequate for any other people. I think that says it all right there. Our leaders need to have virtue. I think whatever religion that virtue comes from, I think is healthy, but absolutely every decision you make, whether it's in the state legislature, school board, or in Congress, or as President of the United States, has to be rooted in faith. That's what this country is all about.
Thank you. Mr. Gray.
Well, thank you, Nathan. One of my favorite fictional stories is The Count of Monte Cristo. It's a story about accountability, justice, truth, and in one of the great adaptations, there have been many, of The Count of Monte Cristo, the Abbé Faria, before he dies, he tells his friend Edmond Dantes, who is in a prison with him, and they were imprisoned unjustly for 20 years, he tells him God sees everything before he dies. It's the last message that he sends Edmond Dantes, and that's the way I live my life. I mean, it's true. It's a basic maybe thought, but it's true, and it's something we need to underscore. And my service as a state legislator, as Secretary of State, has been guided by that focus on truth. No matter whether it's difficult, no matter the attacks from the media, no matter the attacks from the insiders, the governor, the highest official in the state of Wyoming, who the Attorney General serves at the pleasure of, I have been guided on truth and gotten family policy done in this state. We passed, first year I was in the legislature, the ultrasound bill, which was the first pro-life bill in 30 years. And you'll remember, Nathan, when we got that done together in the legislature, they attacked us. They said in the columns, in all the newspapers, they said that these are just legislators who are trying to drive their morals to other people and put their religion on other people. And that is absolutely wrong, and we must continue to stand up to a radical left-wing media that would put that notion out there, because it's wrong, and our guidepost must be our faith, because God sees everything.
Thank you very much. Very good. The next question, Mr. Fries, will go to you, and it's a question on the subject of life. Abortion is the intentional act of ending the life of another human being while in the womb. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, do you support any exceptions to legal protection for unborn children? And would you please explain?
Thank you. Life begins in conception. No exceptions. When I was in 7th grade, a man came to speak to our assembled school. His name was Joe Biden. I listened to him talk about how he was a devout Catholic, and he even said that life begins at conception. And then he went on to say, but who am I to impose my religious belief on others? And I think that was the moment when I became pro-life, because I saw the utter inconsistency in saying one thing and then enacting policies going the other way. Because when you enact policies that not only allow for abortion, but compel others through their tax dollars to fund it, you are compelling others to follow really an evil faith. One of the things that I bring to the table as a candidate is that I worked with a crack group of very smart DC attorneys to prepare executive orders for President Trump that he used in his first term. One of the things we did there, I'm sure many of the people in this room know what Mexico City policy is. This is a policy that's implemented by, it's instituted by Republicans when they hold the presidency, and then it's taken off when Democrats are in control. And what it said at that time was that of the $40 billion of global health aid, there was a $400 million tranche called family planning dollars. Oh, right. Mexico City policy used to just cover and say that those $400 million couldn't be used for abortion. We rewrote it to cover all of global health, which meant that millions of dollars that aid organizations, NGOs, were using to perform abortions around the world, that those funds were caught up from them. That was my contribution to the battle there.
Very good. Thank you so much. Ms. Balo.
I am a mother, and I'm a mother through extraordinary circumstances. I'm a mother because of the selfless love of birth mothers and the miracle of adoption. In some of those women's hardest moments of their lives, they chose life. My family is built through adoption, and every single day, I am grateful beyond words for the courage of those women. They faced a crisis, they chose love, and they chose life. I financially support and I volunteer on the board of directors for the Wyoming Children's Society because I know firsthand how that network of care, that network of support for women in crisis makes a difference. This is what the pro-life movement looks like in action, and this is what I'll take to Congress. How did we reach a place where our culture can celebrate choice, the choice to end a life, yet think it's unbearable to place a child for adoption, to be loved by a family? My conviction will never waver in Congress. My actions will always be compassionate toward birth mothers. They will be compassionate toward people who are in trauma and in crisis, but tax dollars and policies should never, ever pay for or support abortions. I am against abortion, no exception.
Thank you. Mr. Giroux.
Thank you, sir. I do agree with the statement written there above that abortion is the intentional act of ending the life of another human being within the womb, unequivocally. As a practicing Catholic, I do believe in life from conception all the way through to natural death. And I think that what we're seeing across the West, whether that be in Europe or to our neighbors in the North in Canada, it's very troubling for us here as Americans, and it's a warning sign if nothing else. I want to fight for life in Congress, and I'll do that by pursuing legislation that truly matters to this issue. For instance, the Protecting Life from Abortions Act. That prevents the mailing of abortion drugs across this entire country, which has visited great evil upon our nation, quite frankly. Additionally, I'll be a staunch defender of the Hyde Amendment and the protections contained therein. The Hyde Amendment comes up every year for approval and reapproval, and it's used as a negotiating bargaining chip. This should no longer happen. In Congress, I'll seek to codify that. And this is probably shocking to some, but the supporter of that bill as it's currently codified hails from New Jersey, of all places. That is one piece of legislation that will change the framework for how the protections and where our tax dollars are actually going, and ensures that tax dollars from across this nation aren't going to fund abortions, aren't going to harm an innocent life. I'll be a staunch defender of it. I have been my entire life, and will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chapman.
I have a deep-seated feeling about this that was developed from a court case that I was involved in. There was a car accident and a child was killed who was 3 weeks old. They wanted me to represent the murderer. I began to do so, and I found it to be just absolutely the worst experience of my life. It's hard to talk about. My son, he was here, who was young at the time. I'm going to state this differently than anyone else here. Murder is the intentional act of ending the life of another human being. You can call it abortion, it's still murder. We all have kids, and you know, I was very impressed that you adopted, because there's more that morally goes with this. When those kids are born, we need adoption. We need to support them. I was at the Wyoming Food Bank today. What a great place, what great people. And I was overwhelmed with the amount of food and supplies. Walmart is an amazing, amazing partner to them. They must have had 500 dozen eggs? I mean, it's amazing in a world where you can't get an egg. I mean, you can, but, take out the mortgage. Anyway, my point is it is illogical to any human to stand up and state to me that abortion is not murder. And I'm not willing to move on that. You can't use federal money for that. You should not be using the United States Post Office for that. You should not be crossing borders. It's murder.
Thank you very much. Mr. Button?
Thank you, Nathan. Yes, I agree with that statement. And no, I do not personally support any exceptions to life. As a congressman, my role will be much different than it has been in the last 10 years at the state legislature. Thanks to Dobbs, that decision is now right squarely before us here in Wyoming at the state legislature. And we have a lot of work to do. We've passed numerous pro-life bills in Wyoming. I've sponsored or co-sponsored almost all of them, or been a co-sponsor in almost all of them. I've won awards for my pro-life record. My pro-life record is not even debatable. But here we are with basically abortion on demand in Wyoming. This is a state's issue now, and it's important that state legislators get it done. We probably need a constitutional amendment at this point, so I encourage those running for office to get it done now that I'm leaving the legislature. But as far as what I can do in Congress, absolutely no taxpayer funding for abortion, no trafficking of abortion pills across state lines. Those are things we can do in Washington, D.C., but this is now a state's rights issue.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Gray?
I'm 100% pro-life. Agree with the statement, and I'm opposed to any exceptions. No exceptions. I'm 100% pro-life. And the pro-life issue was one of the big motivators in me getting involved in public service about a decade ago. Bob Brechtel from West Casper was one of my mentors, and he fought so hard in the legislature to get pro-life legislation to the finish line. And in 2017, the first year that I was in the legislature, we got that ultrasound bill to the finish line. I was proud to be the lead sponsor of that. And then in 2019, when I heard a rumor that UW was funding abortion in their student plans, I got to work and I told the Legislative Service Office to ask UW formally whether abortion was being funded in their student plans. And the university came back and they admitted to it, although the rumor is the person who drafted the memo was later fired, but they did admit to it, and we put a nice little rider. We came up with a way. How are we going to stop this? It was a budget session, so we came up with a way to put a little rider on their budget that says that if they continued this practice, they wouldn't get a cent of state dollars. And of course, that nipped it in the bud when we got that in there. So I have a track record of getting these things done. It is not just talk for me. Talk is cheap. I have that track record. And at the federal level, we need to have a national pro-life policy. I disagree with Senator Biden in saying that there's no role for the federal government in putting forward a national pro-life policy. And there should be no federal funds for abortion in any way, and we need to have real action by the Congress on this issue.
Thank you very much. Mr. Christensen?
I agree with the statement, and I think that we characterize it as a matter of faith. Would everybody in this room agree this is a matter of faith for most of us in this room? But let's also agree that it is a matter of science. It is a matter of indisputable science. When we talk with people who don't believe the same things we do and maybe have a different faith, let's at least connect with them and understand this isn't just a matter of it's my faith and this is why I believe it. It is also a matter of indisputable science. So when we look at this issue, let's also think about, as pro-life as I am, let's be as pro-mom and baby as well. Pro-nuclear family for that child. We have to break the cycle of what is causing us to be in the situation where abortion is being used as a form of birth control. That family that teaches accountability and raises their family in faith and values and accountability, we will eliminate the need for an abortion in the first place by having families that talk and establish that accountability for their children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question will start with Ms. Balo. Many Americans are concerned that religious freedom is increasingly being treated as merely freedom of worship, rather than the free exercise of faith in their daily life. For example, the previous federal administration, we saw federal policies increasingly affect the religious freedom of healthcare professionals, faith-based ministries, adoption agencies, educators, and small business owners. In the U.S. House of Representatives, how will you ensure that Americans are free to live and work according to their faith without fear of government coercion or retaliation?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think all of us up on this stage are going to agree that limited government and a government that governs the closest to the people is the very best. When government grows, as we've seen it grow over the last decades, that's when decisions and policies like this can take shape, and it's very, very dangerous. So number one, and a little less personal, is limited government to ensure that this doesn't happen. As I mentioned, I'm a born-again Christian. I'm also a confirmed Catholic. And religious liberty matters for everyone. I've had the privilege in my life of spending time with friends and neighbors of many, many different faiths. Right here in Wyoming, I had the honor of attending the opening of the first LDS LDS temple in Wyoming. I've also shared Shabbat with a rabbi and his family right here in Wyoming. And both of those experiences caused me to grow stronger in my Christian faith, and I'm so grateful for the diversity of religion that we have and the freedom to practice whatever we want. I think Wyoming agrees with that too. We're all about faith, family, firmness, friends, and our neighbors. We also have a really good sense of what it means to be a libertarian and let people live the life that they want. That extends to religious freedom, religious liberty. And as your Congresswoman, one thing that I would do, and thank you to, I think it's Art Washit, who was in here and led legislation last session to codify this in Wyoming. There's also an act in Congress that is called the First Amendment Defense Act that I would also support, that basically does the same thing on the congressional level and ensures religious freedom in the workplace, free of coercion.
Thank you. Mr. Giroux.
Having fought overseas to defend our rights, this is something that's deeply important to me. And I think our founding fathers placed this First Amendment appropriately because they wanted to signify the importance of religious freedom and religious liberty here in our nation as a bedrock principle. We don't have to look very far, but there are cases like Little Sisters of the Poor, or even Jack Phillips with the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. They had to defend their religious liberty all the way up and fight that to the Supreme Court of the United States. That shouldn't happen, not in the United States of America. That's exactly why I'll support legislation such as the Conscientious Protection Act. Bills like this support religious freedom, and they allow providers who have a moral disposition to not help perform abortions be exempt from those sorts of situations. Meaningful, tangible legislation that protects people and their religious liberty here in the United States is important, and Congress has an important role in doing that. The other component of that I think is crucially important is preserving the tax-exempt status of not only our churches, but also faith-based organizations across the state and across this country. That can be done through Congress, and it can be made permanent as well, so that families have predictability going forward, and they don't have to worry from budget cycle to budget cycle or the machinations of Congress and their inability to get along in a particular year. This is, like I said, deeply important to me, and I don't think Americans should have to choose between following their government and following their God. It's my goal, my hope, that Congress can get its act together, and I hope to be a part of that solution.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you. My family came from England. They were Quakers. Everything they had in the world was taken from them. I've seen the jail cells that are preserved where they served time until they were able to come into the United States. That being said, I worry about Obama, Biden, and the next Democrat that comes along. Because they will misuse the Department of Justice like they misuse the IRS to attack our institutions. They are better with nonprofits in using legal nonprofits, the Washington elites, than we are. So we have to be sharp. We need to prepare for this inevitable situation, and we need to work together. Individually, everyone in this room needs to know that we will fight together on the individual smaller issues, but globally, we're going to have to address these, and we're going to have to fight, and it's going to be a hard fight, and Congress and the Republicans are going to have to stand together. I also want, with my last 55 seconds, to point out how smart President Trump was. Some people say that he doesn't always listen. He listened very well to pick the right Supreme Court justices to move us forward with our agenda and to make certain that all of our rights are protected and everyone's rights are protected. And I think that is his biggest and most amazing achievement.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bagley.
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, that's a good segue to what I was going to say is a lot of this, the First Amendment's very clear. Do we need more legislation to codify the First Amendment? I don't think so, as a constitutional conservative. But depending on what that legislation looks like, whether it's a Religious Freedom Restoration Act type of legislation that we passed here in Wyoming, we'll take a look at it. But I'll tell you what Congress does have is the power of the purse. And if these agencies are acting in a way that is violating people's rights, especially their First Amendment rights, you defund them immediately. And until they get their act together, you don't give them the money. That's the most powerful power Congress has right now. And then the other thing we can do is, obviously we're not in the Senate, but Frank said about the Supreme Court justices, absolutely. That the fact that all these cases have had to go to the Supreme Court, and the poor baker from Colorado has had to have his life savings drained to protect his First Amendment rights is sick. And America is in a bad place when that has to happen. And that's a failure on our judicial system. Clear and simple. So we need to support good, strict constructionist jurors to the bench.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gray.
Thank you. Well, I think as a slice of life, let's think about Obama, the Little Sisters of the Poor, being forced to buy birth control, to support birth control. That's how radical the radical left is. So in answer to the question, we do need vigorous action to protect our faith. And I think there's numerous ways that needs to be carried out. One, we need religious freedom restoration protections. We need to also codify President Trump's executive order on the tax status of churches. I mean, you think about Lyndon Johnson. There's been a lot written about this, but when he won his big victory in '64, Nathan's an historian, Lyndon Johnson brought through a wave of changes to try to prevent churches from being able to be involved in the public sphere, because he was upset that they opposed him in his election. And it was wrong what he did with the tax status, in removing that tax exemption if they engaged in the public sphere. So we must codify President Trump's executive order, which removes the Johnson bad policy that was put in place in the mid-'60s. We also need to protect health freedoms. I mean, we haven't talked about COVID yet. I mean, the huge restrictions on our freedoms at the state and the national level. We convened a special session to try to stop the mandates that Biden put into place. We didn't get anywhere on that because the insider stopped it. But we need health freedom as well, so people can be able to carry out their free association, their ability to practice their faith.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen.
As Americans, we often take for granted some of our rights. We count on the system, our executive branch and our judiciary, to not infringe upon those rights. But today we have a problem when we have members of our judiciary who do not rule on rule of law. They're ruling off of liberal agendas, pushing their own views, not ruling on the rule of law. The House of Representatives has an important role, and that is to hold judges accountable who are not ruling on the rule of law. They are the ones that have to protect us, our liberties. They're the ones that make sure that the members of the executive branch are not doing crazy things that we saw during the Obama and during the Biden administration. I'm going to give you an example of that. I was a district manager in the Bureau of Land Management, and I was briefing a political appointee in the Biden administration. I had missed the previous meeting, and I shared that I had, with my wife, been out for my daughter's graduation. I was sharing a moment of joy, and also explaining why I had missed the previous meeting. A hush fell over this moment, and the political appointee told me how offended she was at what I had just said. I was taken back. What did I just say that was so offensive? Said, that is not your wife or daughter. That is your spouse or your child. I was so appalled. That is my choice. That's my family, and nobody is going to get between me and my decision on how, that's between my wife and my family, on how we do that. We can't allow those types of people to be in our government, and we can't elect people that won't fight for those. In Congress, I will never allow that to happen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Freeze.
He's pointing to exactly the main thing. To ensure that Americans are free to live and work according to their faith without fear of government coercion or retaliation. Our battle is against the left. A Bill Clinton Democrat does not seem to exist anymore. Maybe around Wyoming I meet a few. But the Kamala AOC Democrats are an entirely different breed of person. I think because they don't believe in God, they believe in man as God. And a man can be perfected by great policies. If they can just tell us all what to do, everything will be right. As you mentioned, wanting to control our language, wanting to rewrite how we're supposed to refer to people with pronouns, telling us that men can turn into women and that boys belong in girls' locker rooms. The insanity of the left, I have to say, it's felt like a breath of fresh air to have Trump in there and to have pushed back on a lot of these, and that they're not in the headlines so much. But they are waiting, they are regrouping, they are strategizing. They are preparing for their next opportunity to come at us with twice the amount of force, because they fundamentally don't believe in America. They have some crazy vision of how the world ought to run, and I can't even get to the bottom of it. But that's the kind of person that I've been fighting all my life. We were under the Obama administration. My dad was threatened with being locked up under some provisions because he had gone and tried to advise our senators that we should be sending weapons to the Kurds as they were fighting ISIS. I'm well aware of another part of this that has to happen is we have to give the executive more power to remove government employees who are clearly in there working against America.
Thank you very much. The next question will actually start with you, Mr. Gerald. The last one was Ms. Baylor, just double checking here in my own mind. Families are the most basic building block of society. And government can either support or hinder families' rights to make the best decisions for their children's education, public spaces, and in child rearing. What do you think the role of government should be in supporting the family to make independent decisions regarding their children's education and role in public spaces and in child rearing?
I think a Wyoming Family Alliance candidate for might be the right place to invoke Aristotle. Of course. So he was right in his observation that the family, the nuclear family, is the fundamental core building block of any political society, not the government. So to answer your question more directly, it's the parents who are first and last in that child's life. They'll see that child, they'll rear that child all the way through their life, and hopefully their relationship evolves over time. In Congress, again, here's another role for them, that we should be protecting parental rights, leaving those decisions to the parents so they can make the best decisions on behalf and with their children as they progress throughout their life. We should keep male out of girls' sports. But it goes beyond that, and having served in the military and seeing discussions behind closed doors in the Pentagon or on Capitol Hill, working in federal policy, it goes further. Our federal government and our departments and agencies shouldn't be environments for social experimentation or social change. Taxpayer funds should not be funding transgender transition surgeries or anything like that. It's not the place for it. I'll oppose any federal funding that does support efforts like that, because the mission and the focus of our federal government should be limited in its scope, in its practice, and it's not what the American people expect from their tax dollars. I'll fight to defend that. I think it's important, and it violates the natural law and order. And I don't have any more Aristotle quotes, but I'll end there.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chapman.
The question, I love this question, it's because what government is doing, what we can do to keep government out is really what we're asking. How do we keep them out of our education? So there's an army in Washington, D.C. made up of Washington elites and bureaucrats that think they know better than every single one of you. Some of them don't even have kids. And they're in the Department of Education, and they're making mandates and passing them down. And the only way that we are going to get these mandates out of our school is to fire those people. Keep enough people to make certain that the states are handling their obligations, and give the money to the states so they can return that money to the classroom. States are guilty too. They layer their departments of education full of administrators. 50 years ago, we had more teachers than administrators. I don't know what the ratio is now, but it's certainly probably 1 to 1. How do you teach somebody when you're sitting in an office? So let's go in and let's fire those people. If nothing more, let's dismantle this so that when the next Democrat administration comes in, it's very difficult to put this controlling mechanism back together. But the only way I see that we're going to get education fixed is to get the Washington elites and bureaucrats out of our schools.
Thank you. Mr. Biden.
Thank you. Sorry to keep sounding like a broken record on the Constitution and the role of government, but the role of government is there to protect your rights, period. It's not to be involved in the family, good or bad, especially at the federal level. So I I don't see any particular piece of legislation that I would be in support of or oppose legislation at the federal level. This is more of a state and local issue for making education decisions. There should be no federal Department of Education. We should abolish that immediately. Education belongs to the states. Just go look at Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. The duties of Congress are clearly defined. Everything after that is reserved to the states and to the people, especially families. Families are in charge of their child's upbringing and everything to do with the raising of their children, and government should not be involved, period.
Thank you so much. Mr. Gray?
The funding aspect is how the bureaucracy and the left has exhibited control over education. And that's why the education savings accounts that have been passed in many states, including in Wyoming, are so important. And I've recognized that. One of the bills that I filed in 2017, the first year I was in the legislature, and back then we only got one vote for it, but it sort of paved the way for it to pass in this 2025 session, was an education savings account bill. It is just absolutely pivotal to remove the funding aspect from the bureaucrats and from the left. And I think there's a role for the federal government to support these education savings account programs. We also must completely eliminate the Department of Education. It's very important, and return that funding component to the states, and I think that interacts with what I just talked about. We have to protect girls and women's sports. I mean, I saw as a millennial in college how they were slowly starting to totally infiltrate and put this gender ideology into the schools. I was kind of on the front end of where they started doing this and witnessed it. And it is really sadistic. We have to ban the transgender surgeries. It's not just banning the funding of the transgender surgeries. We have to ban them entirely. And that's one of the things that the Save America Act does. President Trump recognizes that. So that was added to the election integrity measures, which are important too. But we really need to have a vigorous policy from this Republican Congress to get the job done on advancing these pro-family policies.
Thank you so much. Mr. Christensen.
When we go to specific on this question, we talk about federal government supporting the family. Let's remember something that Ronald Reagan reminded us of. The states created the federal government. The federal government did not create the states. And when the states created the federal government, those states said, before we're joining up on this, we've got a bunch of things that you have to recognize that are states' rights. And there's 10, and they're in the Bill of Rights. And part of the supporting the family is that federal government does not get involved with our role. The core of our society is that family. The family members that have to be engaged. Do you know what your children are seeing on the internet? Do they have access to it? What kinds of things are influencing your child? You have to be that person who is engaged with your kids. It maybe used to be just what they would see in the library. It's much more complex than that now. It's what they're seeing every day. The social media influences on these children are changing their view. The radical left telling them that they may not be a man or a woman. The radical left telling us that you can change if you feel uncomfortable with who you are. We can't allow those things to happen, and the federal government's role is to make sure that that core nuclear family is where the decisions are being made, and we don't get in between the mom, the dad, the parent, and the raising. I am so blessed to have been raised in a family that prayed together and talked about these things. And that's the kind of family core that we need and I will protect in Congress.
Thank you. Mr. Freeze.
I've really enjoyed all the insights that are up here and the different facets that people are presenting. There is a distinction of what should the government's role be in all of this, and yet we've gotten to the point where it's so intrusive, you've got to start passing laws to nip and tuck around the edges to keep things in control. One thing that sort of bleeds into the next question that I was thrilled to see the president do was to implement something next year in your taxes. Your first $1,300 of if you're paying federal taxes, your first $1,300 can be directed to a scholarship organization that could support a private school. This is an unbelievable opportunity. You don't even have to have a child going there. But you could, as we are educated about this, we could drive a lot of funding to schools that were teaching the kind of principles, the kind of ethics, the kind of morals, so that we wouldn't have out-of-wedlock births, because they'd be learning the principles of responsibility. Abortion could go away as an issue if men behave responsibly. It's a tragedy that this gets put on women and is somehow distorted into a woman's right. It's a form of abuse of the men who have taken responsibility for their actions. Sorry to move from a couple different places here. I hope you've all found this to be fascinating. I've loved hearing from all these colleagues up here. There's so much to offer. But again, my overall view is that the federal government needs to do less. More authority should come back to the states. That's an overriding principle that I'll take with me if you send me to Washington.
Thank you. Ms. Bailey.
Thank you so much. As your state superintendent in Wyoming, fighting back against government overreach and